On this third Sunday in our Lenten season, we have one of the more thorny gospel lessons that are appointed throughout the span of the lectionary, and that's Jesus cleansing the temple. And this very strange story of him kicking out the merchants has been interpreted and maybe misinterpreted many ways over the years. And I think really what is happening in this narrative, Jesus is less concerned about the actual money changing happening, but it's this idea of selling the animals for ritual sacrifice as if salvation or God's pleasure is something to be purchased or won or earned. That really, Jesus is trying to say that the temple is a place for worship and to learn and to find intimacy with God rather than to purchase it or to make a trade for it. It's really more about following in the steps of Christ. His ire is much more about this idea that the temple is a place of transaction, a marketplace, rather than a place of intimacy where we can know God. And of course, that all is based on the personhood of Jesus Christ, the foundation of what we think of as the church, of the place where we can come to know God in a truer and deeper way. So this Sunday, kind of foreshadowing that gospel lesson, we will start the service off with the very familiar hymn, Christ is Made the Sure Foundation. The text of this is at least back to the 9th century, which is the first written manuscript that we have that has this Latin poem, but it probably goes back centuries beyond that, at least the 7th century, possibly as early as the 6th century. So this is one of our older Latin hymns that we still sing today. And it's a very expansive hymn, and it thinks about the church and Jesus Christ as the foundation of the church in almost mystical, visionary ways. As an English translation hymn, it's actually fairly recent in our tradition, and it gained a lot of popularity when it made its first big popularized use as the procession hymn at the wedding of Princess Margaret and the Earl of Snowdon. And then it's been very popular with English and American congregations since, especially paired here with the English Baroque tune by Henry Purcell. Henry Purcell did not write this tune exactly as it is now in use as a hymn. It was actually the tail end of one of his anthems, and it's been sort of arranged and adapted by a 20th century English composer, James Gillespie. But Henry Purcell is, of course, a very foundational member of the English church music tradition, and the naming of this tune, Westminster Abbey, which was named by the adapter, James Gillespie, not by Purcell himself, but it honors that Purcell started off as the organ tuner. He actually maintained the organ in Westminster Abbey before actually then becoming the director of music and organist at Westminster Abbey, and his tenure there was such a success that he's even one of the few musicians that's buried within the Abbey church. And you'll also hear a little foreshadowing of that tune at the prelude. The piece that starts the service off is an American composer, Richard Prue, him taking that melody and using it on a colorful group of stops on the organ called the cornet that has a real rich sound. And you'll hear a fanciful version of the melody and a beautiful flute accompaniment. And that will kind of set the stage for that opening procession hymn. At the offertory, the choir will be singing a lush American piece by the contemporary American composer Aaron J. Kernis. Kernis is known mainly for his chamber works and his orchestral music, more secular as a composer. This is one of his few sacred works, but it's a really beautiful piece, Teach Me Thy Way, O Lord. And again, taking those words from the psalm and kind of thinking about following Christ as the foundation of our church. It has a lot of very specific organistic touches. It starts off with a high 3 notes in the pedals, so you'll notice that Unjen is playing with her feet only, playing 3 notes at a time. and it has some really beautiful melodies and rich American harmonies. And that's another way that we can think about our discipleship of Christ as we go through this season. So we hope that you will join us here for the third Sunday in our Lenten journey here at St. John's Cathedral.